Don't you dare. You don't get to take credit for Martha's work again. I heard Philip's voice booming from the conference room. I froze outside the door, files clutched to my chest, the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. You have no idea what you're talking about, Danielle replied, her voice eerily calm. I've been cultivating the Synex relationship for months. Martha is simply executing my strategy. I took a deep breath and pushed through the door. Both of them turned to look at me. Philip, my loyal team member with his perpetually rumpled blazer, and Danielle Fulton, our newly promoted vice president of sales, immaculate in her tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Martha, perfect timing, Philip said, relief washing over his face. Tell Danielle who actually created the pitch deck for Synex. My name is Martha Ellison. I'm 32 years old and have spent the last 6 years working my way up at Orion Tech Solutions in Cincinnati, Ohio. We develop logistics software for transportation companies. Nothing flashy, but essential infrastructure that keeps goods moving across the country. I started as a junior sales associate and worked my way up to business development manager through pure grit and results. My diploma from Ohio University hangs in my modest cubicle, not Harvard or Stanford like many of our executives, a fact that Danielle never let me forget. We were just discussing the Synex presentation, Danielle said smoothly, as though Philip hadn't been shouting moments before. I'll need your notes by end of day so I can finalize everything. I met her gaze steadily. Actually, Danielle, the presentation is already finalized. The entire deck is built around the customized supply chain solution I developed specifically for their multimodal needs. Well, I'll need to review it thoroughly, she replied with a tight smile. We can't risk losing this deal. It would be our largest contract ever. $50 million over 5 years. I nodded. I'm aware of what's at stake. What I didn't say was that I had been working on landing Synex Holdings for nearly a year. Countless early mornings, late nights and weekend work sessions had gone into understanding their pain points, crafting the perfect solution, and building trust with their team. I'd flown to their headquarters in Detroit 4 separate times, each visit bringing me closer to closing this career-defining deal. As Philip and I walked back to our desks, he shook his head. She's going to try to push you out of the final meeting. You know that, right? I sighed. Let her try. Tasha Brennan won't sign anything unless I'm in that room. What Danielle didn't know, what nobody at Orion Tech knew, was that Tasha, the CEO of Synex Holdings, had been my roommate in college. We'd shared a cramped off-campus apartment for 2 years, splitting ramen noodles and pulling all-nighters together. We still met for brunch whenever she was in town. I hadn't leveraged our friendship to get the deal. That would have been unprofessional, but it certainly helped get my foot in the door. As I walked back to my desk, I noticed an email from our CEO requesting my presence at tomorrow's executive meeting. A chill ran down my spine. Something told me this wasn't about a promotion. The executive boardroom always made me uncomfortable. Everything was too polished. The gleaming mahogany table, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Cincinnati, the subtle smell of lemon polish and power. I smoothed down my department store blazer and took a seat at the far end of the table, painfully aware of being the only person in the room without an Ivy League pedigree. Our CEO, Jonathan Pierce, sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable behind steel-rimmed glasses. Danielle sat to his right, a portfolio open in front of her. 3 other executives filled out the room, all men, all wearing nearly identical navy suits. Martha, thank you for joining us, Jonathan began. Danielle tells me you've made significant progress with Synex Holdings. I nodded, pulling out my own notes. Yes, we're in the final stages. They've verbally committed to the full package and we're scheduled to sign the contract next week. $50 million over 5 years with an option to renew. Jonathan leaned forward, fingers steepled. That's excellent work. It would be the largest contract in Orion Tech's history. Thank you, I replied, a small flutter of pride warming my chest. It's been a team effort, but yes, I'm proud of where we've landed. The thing is, Danielle interjected, we're concerned about Synex's enterprise-level needs moving forward. I frowned. I've built the entire proposal around their enterprise infrastructure. The implementation plan addresses every concern their IT department raised. Not just the technical aspects, Danielle continued smoothly. The relationship management. A client of this size requires a certain level of finesse. My stomach dropped. I'd seen this before, Danielle positioning to take over accounts after I'd done all the heavy lifting, but never with a client this significant. I've been managing the relationship for nearly a year, I said carefully. Tasha, Miss Brennan, has specifically requested that I oversee the implementation. Danielle's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course you've done excellent foundational work, Martha. No one's disputing that. But they were. I could see it in the way the executives exchanged glances. In the way Jonathan avoided my eyes. We need to ensure this flagship account receives our most experienced talent, Danielle continued. I'll be taking point on the final negotiations and signing. 6 years of loyalty, countless weekends sacrificed, the biggest deal in company history nearly closed, and they were pushing me aside at the finish line. Is there a concern with my performance? I asked directly. Jonathan finally looked at me. Not at all, you've exceeded expectations, but as we grow we need to consider the image we project to high-value clients. Danielle has experience with Fortune 500 accounts that you simply don't have. What he didn't say, but what hung in the air between us, was that Danielle had a Harvard MBA and connections in all the right places. I had a state school diploma and results. Somehow results weren't enough anymore. The next week passed in a blur of forced smiles and late nights. I handed over all my Synex files to Danielle, briefed her on every conversation I'd had with their team, and even drafted talking points for the final meeting. I did everything asked of me with professional courtesy, even as resentment burned in my chest. On Friday afternoon, with the contract signing scheduled for Monday morning, I received another calendar invitation from Jonathan. Another executive meeting, his time with HR copied. My heart sank. I knew what was coming, but it still felt like a bucket of ice water when I walked into the room and saw the manila folder sitting in front of my chair. Martha, thank you for your contributions to Orion Tech, Jonathan began, his corporate mask firmly in place. As you know, we're constantly evaluating our organizational structure to ensure we're positioned for the next phase of growth. I remained silent, waiting for him to get to the point. Beside him, Danielle had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. We've decided to restructure the business development department effective immediately, he continued. Unfortunately, your position has been eliminated. The words hung in the air between us. 6 years of my life discarded in a single euphemism. I see, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. May I ask why now, days before closing the largest contract in company history? This isn't about the Synex deal, Jonathan replied, though we all knew it was. This is about our long-term strategic direction. We need to elevate our team's credentials as we pursue more enterprise clients. You mean you need people with fancier diplomas? I said flatly, his expression tightened. We need people with elite educational backgrounds and enterprise experience moving forward. His eyes flickered briefly to the Ohio University degree that had been packed in the box now sitting at my feet. Danielle leaned forward. We're prepared to offer a generous severance package, 3 months' salary and benefits, plus a letter of recommendation. How thoughtful, I replied, the bitterness finally seeping into my voice. I could feel my face flushing with anger and humiliation. 6Y. Years of sacrifice distilled into a pulvery goodbye package. The head of HR, a woman I'd barely interacted with during my time at Orion Tech, slid the manila folder toward me. All the details are in here. We'll need your badge and laptop before you leave today. I looked at each of their faces, searching for a shred of genuine regret or appreciation for what I'd built. There was none, just discomfort at an unpleasant task, and eagerness to move on. Thank you for the opportunity, I finally said, standing up and gathering my things with as much dignity as I could muster. No dramatic speech, no tears, no begging. I simply took the folder, nodded, and walked out. As I packed up my cubicle, Philip hovered nearby, his face a mask of outrage and sympathy. This is insane. After everything you've done, after sinks, I carefully wrapped my Ohio University diploma in tissue paper. It's fine, Philip. Really, it's not fine. You landed a $50 million deal and they fire you before the ink is dry. You should fight this. I looked at him, a strange calm settling over me despite the day's devastation. They've made their choice and on Monday morning they're going to realize it was the wrong one. What do you mean? I smiled slightly as I closed the box. Just wait and see. Monday morning, 9:30 a.m., I was sitting in my apartment in yoga pants, sipping coffee and scrolling through job listings when my phone lit up with a text from Tasha. About to head into the Lion's Den. Wish you were here, brunch this weekend to celebrate. I smiled, typing back, absolutely, good luck today, call me after. What Tasha didn't know, what I hadn't told her, was that I wouldn't be in the meeting. I deliberately hadn't mentioned my termination during our brief call over the weekend. Some might call it calculating, but I preferred to think of it as letting events unfold naturally. My phone buzzed again almost immediately with Tasha's reply. Of course. Can't wait to work with you on this. I set my phone down, trying to ignore the twisted knot in my stomach. Part of me felt guilty for not warning her. A larger part of me wanted Orion Tech to experience the consequences of their decision firsthand. Across town in the gleaming Orion Tech conference room, Danielle Fulton would be arranging presentation materials, making sure everything was perfect for the most important signing in company history. Jonathan would likely be there early too, ready to take credit for the acquisition. They'd be smiling, confident, completely unaware of the tsunami heading their way. My phone rang at 10:15 a.m. Philip's name flashed on the screen. Martha. Oh my God, he said the moment I answered. You are not going to believe what just happened. Try me, I replied, setting down my coffee mug. Tasha Brennan walked into the conference room, looked around, and the first thing she said was, "Where's Martha?" Danielle tried to explain that you were no longer with the company, but Brennan cut her off. She said, and I quote, "If Martha's not involved, we need to revisit this contract immediately." I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. What did Jonathan do? He started doing damage control, talking about team approaches and how they value your contribution, but are moving in a strategic direction. Complete bull. Brennan wasn't having it. She said she'd been clear from the beginning that you were the reason Sinks was on-sidering Orion Tech, and without you, the deal needs to be re-evaluated. A small vindictive part of me savored the image of Danielle's face as her victory crumbled. Then what happened? I asked. They're in Jonathan's office now. It's chaos here, Martha. Absolute chaos. Danielle is practically having a meltdown. She's been calling legal to see if there's any way to force Synex to honor the verbal agreement. There isn't, I said simply. I'd made sure the formal agreement wasn't signed before my departure. How did you know this would happen? Philip asked. I hesitated, then decided he deserved the truth. Tasha was my college roommate. We've been friends for over a decade. There was a long silence, and Orion Tech had no idea, he finally said, something like awe in his voice. They never asked. They saw my state school diploma and assumed I couldn't possibly have valuable connections. So, what happens now? It was the question I'd been wrestling with all weekend. Part of me wanted to watch Orion Tech implode without the Sinks deal. Another part, the professional who'd given 6 years to this company, couldn't completely abandon ship. That depends on what they do next, I replied. Honestly, I didn't have to wait long to find out. Within an hour my phone was blowing up. 3 missed calls from Danielle, 2 from Jonathan, a text message from an unknown number that turned out to be the head of HR, all with increasing levels of panic and forced politeness. I let them stew for another hour before finally answering Jonathan's 4th call. Martha, he said, relief evident in his voice. We need to talk. I'm listening, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There seems to have been a misunderstanding with Sinks. Miss Brennan is under the impression that you're essential to the deal. That's not a misunderstanding, Jonathan, that's a fact. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost see Jonathan removing his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose the way he did when negotiations weren't going his way. Perhaps we acted hastily on Friday, he finally said. We'd like to discuss bringing you back to oversee the Synex implementation. I laughed, unable to help myself. You fired me 3 days ago because I don't have an Ivy League degree. Now you want me back because you're about to lose $50 million. That's not, he began, but I cut him off. It is exactly what happened, Jonathan. Let's not pretend otherwise. Another long pause. What would it take, Martha, to come back and salvage this deal? I'd spent the weekend considering this very question. At first, fueled by hurt and anger, I'd imagined demanding an outrageous salary. Danielle's job, public apologies. But as the initial sting faded, clarity emerged. I didn't want to return to a company that had discarded me so easily. No amount of money or title could repair that broken trust. Nothing, I replied simply. I'm not interested in coming back. Everyone has a price, Jonathan insisted. Name yours. Vice president, title, equity, both. This isn't about money or titles, this is about respect. You showed me exactly how much you value my contributions on Friday afternoon. I admit we handled the transition poorly. Transition? I interrupted, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. You fired me days before closing the biggest deal in company history. Because my diploma didn't have enough ivy on IT. That's not a transition, Jonathan, that's elitism, plain and simple. The line went quiet again. When Jonathan spoke, his voice had lost its executive polish. Tasha Brennan is threatening to walk. We're talking about $50 million, Martha. The board is having an emergency meeting this afternoon. That sounds like a problem for you and Danielle to solve with your elite degrees. Please, he said, and I was startled to hear actual desperation. Just come to a meeting, name your terms, whatever you want. I thought about Tasha sitting in that conference room, defending me when I wasn't there to defend myself. I thought about all the late nights I'd worked while Danielle left at 5 sharp. I thought about the subtle digs at my state school education, the promotions that went to less qualified people with better pedigrees, the constant need to prove myself over and over again. I'll think about it, I finally said, not quite ready to close the door completely. But in the meantime you should know that Tasha has integrity. If she says the deal depends on my involvement, then it does. I hung up before he could respond, my heart pounding. The phone rang again immediately, but I let it go to voicemail. Then a text appeared from Tasha. These people are unbelievable. They fired you after everything you did to land this account. I'm furious. Call me a sap. I smiled despite myself and called her back. Martha, she exclaimed upon answering. What the hell happened? Why didn't you tell me they let you go? I wanted to see what they'd say, I admitted, whether they'd own up to it or try to hide it. Well, they tried to spin some garbage about restructuring and strategic vision, but I wasn't buying it. The arrogance of these people. As if I wouldn't notice you were gone. Thank you for standing up for me, I said quietly. You didn't have to do that. Of course I did. You're the only reason we considered Orion Tech in the first place. Their solution isn't even the best on the market. But you convinced me you could make it work for our needs. I hesitated before asking the question that had been hovering in my mind. So, what happens now with the contract? Tasha's voice took on the sharp, decisive tone I recognized from our college days when she decided something important. That depends on you. If you want me to walk away from Orion Tech completely, I will. But I have another idea if you're interested. I'm listening. You remember Gregory Wilson? He was a year ahead of U.S. economics major. Vaguely, I replied, trying to place the name. He founded Wilson Enterprise Solutions 5 years ago, direct competitor to Orion Tech, but with a more innovative approach. They've been trying to get a meeting with me for months. I sat up straighter, immediately seeing where she was going with this. Greg's looking for a new business development director, Tasha continued. Someone who understands logistics software, and has connections in the industry. Sound like anyone you know? You want me to go work for a direct competitor? I asked, my mind racing with possibilities. I want you to interview with them, Tasha clarified. What happens after that is up to you and Greg. But yes, if you took the job and if their solution meets our needs, I'd be very interested in discussing a partnership. The pieces clicked into place with dizzying speed. I could jump to a competitor, bring sinks with me, and show Orion Tech exactly what they'd thrown away. It was the perfect revenge. Professional, clean, and completely ethical. Send me Greg's contact information, I decided. I'll reach out today. Already texted it to you, Tasha replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. He's expecting your call. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a downtown cafe across from Gregory Wilson, founder and CEO of Wilson Enterprise Solutions. He was younger than I expected, barely 40, with the energetic presence of someone who built something from nothing. Tasha speaks very highly of you, he said after we'd exchanged pleasantries. Says you're the most client-focused person she's ever worked with. I believe in relationships over transactions, I replied. Technology changes, but trust is constant. We spent the next hour discussing his company, my experience, and the logistics software market. Unlike my interviews at Orion Tech years ago, Greg never once asked about my educational background. He was focused entirely on results and approaches. So, here's the situation, he finally said, leaning forward. We're a smaller player than Orion Tech, but we're growing fast. Our technology is superior, more adaptable, cloud-native, better UI. What we lack is someone who can get us in front of the right enterprise clients, someone with relationships and industry knowledge? I nodded. Exactly. I'll be blunt, Martha. I want to poach you. I want to offer you our business development director position reporting directly to me. Full autonomy over your client strategy, equity in the company, and a salary that will make Orion Tech's best offer look insulting. My eyebrows rose. That's quite a pitch. I believe in investing in talent. Greg shrugged. And from what Tasha tells me, you're exactly the talent we need. The fact that Orion Tech was stupid enough to let you go is their loss and my gain. For the first time since Friday, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. I like your approach, Greg. When would you need an answer? How about right now? He challenged, a twinkle in his eye. I laughed. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I'll need to see the formal offer first, though I have to admit I'm definitely interested. Fair enough. I'll have it to you by end of day. He stood and extended his hand. I'm looking forward to working together, Martha. As we shook hands, my phone buzzed with another call from Jonathan. I silenced it without looking. Problem? Greg asked, noticing the gesture. Not anymore, I replied with certainty. By the time I got home, I had 7 missed calls from Orion Tech executives, 3 voicemails pleading for a meeting, and an email from Danielle that was almost comically desperate. I deleted them all and opened the formal offer Greg had sent over. The compensation package made me gasp. Base salary twice what I'd been making, significant equity, signing bonus, relocation allowance if I wanted it. Most importantly, the title and authority I deserved. I signed it immediately and emailed it back. Then I called Tasha. It's done, I told her. I start at Wilson next Monday. Perfect, she replied, satisfaction evident in her voice. I just emailed Orion Tech formally, withdrawing from contract discussions. How did they take it? Like they'd been hit by a truck. Jonathan actually suggested they might take legal action. I snorted. On what grounds? You never signed anything. NG. Exactly what I told him. I also mentioned that we're exploring other options that better align with our strategic direction. Let me guess, you're meeting with Wilson next week, Tuesday morning. I thought you might want to sit in. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The next months unfolded like a masterclass in professional karma. I started at Wilson Enterprise Solutions the following Monday, diving into my new role with enthusiasm and purpose. Greg gave me the freedom to build my team and strategy from scratch without the constraints I'd faced at Orion Tech. My first official act as business development director was to prepare for the Synex meeting. When Tuesday arrived, I walked into the conference room with confidence, greeting Tasha with a warm hug before seamlessly transitioning into my presentation. 2 hours later we had the framework of an agreement, $45 million over 5 years, slightly less than the Orion Tech deal, but with significantly better technology and implementation support. Word travels fast in our industry. When news broke that Synex Holdings had signed with Wilson instead of Orion Tech, other clients took notice. My phone started ringing with calls from contacts I'd cultivated over the years, all curious about why I'd made the switch, and what Wilson could offer that Orion Tech couldn't. I never spoke ill of my former employer. I didn't have to. The facts spoke for themselves. Orion Tech had fired me immediately after I landed their biggest ever contract, then lost that same contract when the client discovered I was gone. It was a cautionary tale that executives whispered about at industry conferences. 3 months into my new role, I got an unexpected LinkedIn message from Philip. Danielle was let go yesterday. Board cited the Sinks disaster and failure to retain key talent. Thought you'd want to know. I felt a moment of satisfaction quickly followed by concern for my former team. How are things there? I wrote back. Tent stock is down 30% since the Synex news. Rumors of layoffs. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I sent Philip a message. If you're interested in a change, Wilson is hiring. We value results over pedigree here. 2 weeks later he joined my team. The first of several talented Orion Tech employees who made the switch in the coming months. 1 year after my unceremonious firing, Wilson Enterprise Solutions had grown by 150%. Our client roster included 3 former Orion Tech flagship accounts, including Synex Holdings. My team, now 15 strong and growing, was a diverse mix of backgrounds, educations, and experiences, united by their drive and client focus. I just wrapped up our quarterly planning meeting when my assistant said Greg wanted to see me. I found him in his office reviewing financial projections with a satisfied expression. The board meeting went well? I asked, taking a seat. Greg looked up with a grin. Extremely. We're on track to surpass Orion Tech in market share by quarter 3. That's ahead of projections. It is largely thanks to you and your team. He pushed a folder across the desk, which is why I wanted to discuss this with you first. Inside was a press release draft announcing my promotion to Chief Revenue Officer effective immediately. Greg, I don't know what to say, I managed, genuinely surprised. Say yes. You've earned it. You've transformed our ES organization, brought in top talent, and landed clients we couldn't even get meetings with before. I smiled, thinking about how different this moment felt from my last executive interaction at Orion Tech. Then yes, absolutely yes. As I left Greg's office, I checked my phone and found a text from Tasha. Have you seen the news about Orion Tech? I hadn't. A quick search revealed the headlines. Orion had announced a strategic restructuring following 4 consecutive quarters of declining revenue. Jonathan Pierce was stepping down as CEO. The company was seeking a buyer. I felt no joy at their downfall, only a sense of professional vindication. They had valued pedigree over performance, connections over competence, appearances over results. The market had simply corrected their mistake. That evening I passed the Ohio University diploma, hanging proudly in my new corner office. I smiled at it, a reminder that success isn't about where you start. It's about where you finish, and who you become along the way.